Thank you very much. How many of you guys are directly involved in the sales of your app, agency, what have you? Directly have a sales role? Probably a good half, maybe a little bit more. How many of you close 100% of the deal opportunities that you have? Because if you do, I'm going to give you this mic right now. I've had the privilege and the pain of probably having 2,000 or 3,000 sales conversations in my short career in the web, selling web services. So from it, there have been many, many, many lessons learned. There has been some amazing advice already today, things that you can do to help automate your sales process, ideas on how to better position yourself. I think one observation that I've had in talking to other partners and agency owners is that, and this kind of goes very much in line with what Kurt said earlier, is it has to be unique to you and authentic to how you approach sales. I'm a very, very methodical, process-driven person, so I approach sales in a very different way than someone else might. I'm going to share about 20 lessons that I've learned in the last 8 years, 10 years of doing GrowSpark, running GrowSpark. Again, these are what we've experienced, what we've learned. Hopefully, one or two of them might be relevant for you guys. So we'll jump right into it. We're a semi-distributed organization, so our headquarters are in Boston. About half our team is there. The other half is kind of spread throughout the country. Focus exclusively on Shopify, Shopify Plus experts. We do primarily custom-based solutions, so custom design, custom development, custom integrations. So a lot of what I'm talking about is specific to that, specific to selling custom services rather than just pre-built or pre-packaged offerings. A bunch of other stuff about me. The one interesting thing, if anyone here is a motorcycle fan, I've actually spent the last year traveling around the country on my motorcycle running GrowSpark full-time. So if any of you are interested in motorcycling or the digital nomad thing or managing remote teams, I have had a ridiculous 12 months of dealing with it around the US. So many lessons learned there as well. So the first thing, I'm a big believer in looking at your pipeline, right? Everyone's obsessed with pipeline and opportunities and things like that. I think it's important to think about managing relationships and not prospects in that pipeline. It's very easy to look at an email or a phone number and sort of anonymize it. You don't know who that is. It's just some person, right? But they are people, right? There is a person behind that email, behind that phone number, behind that handle. And it's really easy to get obsessed with what's the next close, right? What's the next opportunity? And I think when you spend too much time looking at the data and just running reports and thinking about steps and stages in your proposals and chances of close, et cetera, you can find yourself kind of losing sight that these are people that need help. Every one of our clients is someone who has a job or a company, and they need us to help them look good, perform better, make money, what have you. And I think if you just make a slight mind shift into thinking that this person is here so I can help them and not so I can just close the deal, and you start to treat every single contact in your CRM or your Excel spreadsheet or what have you as a real person and think about how you as a real person want to be treated, it definitely changes the way you approach sales, and I think what at least we have found makes everything a little bit more of an authentic exchange with people. So just a first thing to kind of think a little bit about. The next, given that we do treat people as people, there is also as we've talked about a little bit before in Natasha's presentation there's a lot of folks out there who are willing to just start hitting you up with requests, asking for this, asking for that, not being respectful of your own process. And because of that, you do have to put some boundaries in place. So we believe quite a bit into kind of what we call self-qualifying. So we try to make it really easy for someone to get in touch with us initially, but we won't actually schedule that first call until they've taken the time to fill out, not a very long survey, but a couple questions that are key to their project. Until they tell us exactly their budget, their timeline, why they're motivated to do this project, why they reached out to us specifically. Until they do that, we won't set up a call. The reason is because if they can't take the 2 minutes it takes to fill out that survey, there's no way you're going to close a deal with that client. And even if you do, they're not going to be a client that's going to respect your process going forward. So we're very big believers in having a strict upfront kind of pre-qualification process. The next thing, so part of this, you have them inquire, they fill out this little form, you have your first conversation. That first conversation, the qualifying conversation, is all about the high-level fit. Are we in line in terms of budget, in terms of timeline, in terms of what you need, in terms of what I can produce, all these things. This is a huge drop-off point for us. So I would say roughly, for every inquiry we get, we get about 20 to 30% of people that just ghost. They won't even fill that initial inquiry form out. Those who do and have a first call with us, about 50% of people are probably not actually qualified to work with us at that point. So that is a huge opportunity for us to either waste a ton of time trying to pursue those deals, or just to say, hey, you know what, there's not a good fit here, no problem, talk to this partner, talk to this other resource, what have you. So what we try to do to really, really reinforce that is we give every single one of our quote-unquote qualified opportunities homework. They have to fill out another survey or provide a specific type of document to us that allows us to understand what they're really trying to achieve in their project. So what we're doing in this process of having them fill out the survey, having them do this homework, is again, just ensuring that it's worth investing your own time into the opportunity. Now, for us, again, we're doing primarily custom services. Most of our projects are in the $30,000 to $150,000 range. So it's a little bit different side of selling Shopify. But when you're getting to that stage and you're selling larger engagements, you might have to spend 20, 30, 40 hours to close a deal. A deal that big is worth it. But until you start weeding out those unqualified opportunities up front, you might find yourself just sinking resources in where you shouldn't. The next thing, so I've found that it's extremely helpful in that first conversation to try and come with just 5 extremely specific recommendations for the client so that you can instantly get them excited about your expertise, about your commitment to potentially helping them, and about the level of detail that you pay attention to their brand and their website and what have you. So if you can, try to show up in that first conversation. It doesn't have to be 5, 3, 5, 10 if you're an overachiever, but try to show up and really pay attention and be able to deliver immediate value to the client. Because if you go up and it's just a generic pitch, generic conversation, there's going to be nothing that distinguishes you from all the other people that they're going to be speaking with. But if you can actually give them something they can apply immediately, there's no reason they shouldn't at least continue that conversation with you. The next thing, when you get further into the process, at least for us, we put together project scope documents, very technical breakdowns of exactly what the client wants us to do from a design perspective, functionality perspective, et cetera. Now, those are really important. In fact, when you get into the project, they're the most important thing because that's what you're going to be held accountable to. Well, you said you're going to install this app and you said you were going to build this thing. Well, you actually have written proof of whether you did or didn't. So we'll talk about scoping in a sec in more detail. But early on and early in your, any kind of documentation you have for your clients or conversations, you need to focus on selling the vision for the project and not just scoping the details. So I have a tendency to do this. I love solving technical problems. So I want to jump in. I want to know exactly what's going wrong. And, well, we can use this API to do that, et cetera. The problem is when you do that too early in the conversation, for most clients, not everyone, but most clients, they're business owners, they're CMOs, they're folks who aren't necessarily as technically oriented as you are. And because of that, you're going to be talking about things that are the trees, not the forest. You want to make sure that you keep your conversations, especially early in the sales process, as vision-focused as possible. You said you're motivated to do this project because X, Y, Z. Here's how we can solve those key business problems for you. So really pay attention early on in the vision and later on in sort of the details of the project, which we'll get into. Now, when it comes to scoping projects, we have found a specific set. We found that requirements should be thought of in specific components. All right, so this gets a little technical, but for us, when we're scoping out a Shopify project, there's a few elements to it. There's design requirements. Again, doing all custom design work, so what templates are we designing? There's functional requirements. What features do you want to have exist within those themes, or the theme you're creating? There's integration requirements. What third-party apps or platforms you need to integrate with your site? There's content and data migration requirements. If someone's coming from another platform, you have to move customer records, et cetera. And then there's marketing and analytics requirements. So what conversion tracking, reporting tools, et cetera, do you need to have? Now, it's really easy to jump in and just say, oh, well, we're going to build a theme for you. It's going to be awesome. Trust me, dude. It's going to be 20 grand and sign up. We all want to do that because we want to close the deal. But if you actually spend the time during the scoping process and go through each one of those 5 or 6 areas and really try to dig into exactly what data are you looking to integrate, exactly what kind of networks are you advertising with that require conversion tracking. If you really pay attention to each one of those individual components, you can actually build a pretty robust project scope that not only helps prove your expertise, give you kind of laurels to sit on when it comes to actually executing the project, but also giving you very clear directive to your team. So when it comes to then giving that to a project manager or an account manager, you have a very nice, clean roadmap for them to actually start working off of. So that's something that we really stress in these project scopes is think about every individual aspect as a different portion of the project that deserves kind of equal attention. Another thing I'm a very big believer is never write the same document twice. So this could be an email, this could be the way you approach a project scope, it could be a proposal, it could be your forms. Everything you do, if you've done it twice, that means you need to create a template. Could be a Google Doc template, could be a Word editor, a text pad, whatever. Just create a standardized approach to how you communicate with clients during the sales process and just have it so you can just copy paste, put in their name, put in their company information and send it out. There has been nothing more no more of an effective life hack for me than really focusing on templatizing every aspect of my communications with clients. And it's not that hard to templatize, but personalize at the same time. You add a one-sentence little personalized introduction statement, and that's enough, honestly, to make it feel pretty unique. But I do believe it's a huge time saver that really adds up as you do more and more of it. Now, the next thing, and I'm very guilty of not doing this, is speaking your client's language. So when someone comes to you and they start asking questions like, well, how do I set up my website template, and what is this, plugin that I want to use, and clearly not understanding the language that Shopify has specifically, or they kind of make up their own words, or they're using pure BizSpeak to kind of communicate what they want to accomplish. You have to really pay attention to the language, literally the language that your client is using, for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you don't speak their language, it's going to be harder to build rapport, to build trust, and to build clarity in the communications that you have with them. So if they speak in a very technical, very detail-oriented way, ideally you would mirror them. Ideally, you would also speak in a very detailed, very technical way. If they're talking high-level, big-picture stuff, and you start getting into those technical weeds, you might lose them. So you really want to think about an opportunity in building that rapport by just mirroring the language that your clients use as much as possible, both conversations and in written format. The next thing is, for us, we have found that we have more success when we think about the closing kind of step in our opportunities and really paying attention to thinking about the close by sending a contract and not a proposal. And what I mean by that is if I have gotten to the point where I have already scoped the project, understood the challenges our clients have dealt with, their resource constraints, et cetera, I've given them these documents, we've talked about time and money, if they're not sold before I give them another document, no matter how fancy that document might be, no matter how well designed that might be, whether it's a PowerPoint or a written presentation, if I can't close them before I give them that quote-unquote proposal, I'm not going to win the business. Now, you can challenge that 100%, but I have found for us that if we haven't closed them by the time we say, okay, we've given you the scope, we've told you the cost and the time, do you want to move ahead? No proposal in the world is going to change that for us. Again, that totally varies for everyone, but we really believe that our investment in the process, the communication, the level of detail that we have in our conversations with clients, those are the things that are going to change whether or not we close that deal, not that kind of final deliverable that we give them. Now, the next thing, as much time as we do invest in scoping out our projects ahead of time, no matter what, there's no way you can truly scope it out to the nth degree. There are a million details that go into building a successful e-commerce business that you just can't cover during the sales process. It would just be unprofitable for you to spend all that time. Not only that, but you need designers and developers and marketers. You need other folks involved in those conversations to be able to ask the right questions. So what we believe in more than anything, probably one of the most key changes that we've made to our business in the last couple of years is breaking our projects into two distinct phases. So we have a planning phase and we have a delivery phase for every one of our engagements. Clients pay us, it starts at $10,000 to do a planning phase with us. You're not getting shit at the end of that, but you're gonna pay up front and we're gonna scope the hell out of it. And during that first 2-4 weeks or whatever it is for the planning phase, we're going to go over every detail you can possibly imagine about your business, and we're going to have a killer strategy that we're then ready to execute during delivery. Now, we do this for a couple of reasons. One is it allows us to adjust timeline, budget, and expectations as we start to uncover more information about our clients. And I guarantee you're going to uncover more information about your clients as you start to get into this planning process. Two, it also allows us to kind of think about the scoping process as a collaborative effort. So rather than it being, well, you tell me what you want and I'll tell you how much I'm going to charge you, it's like, listen, you told me a bunch of stuff. here's a good range of what we think it's going to be, but why don't we agree that it's going to take 2 to 4 weeks or however much time for us to work collaboratively together to really explore all this stuff in detail and get on the 100% the same page as to what we're going to execute. So doing this has been a huge change for us. I highly recommend every one of you have some sort of way to charge your clients to fully scope out your project. Now for us, it means we just give a ranged estimate in our initial sales conversations and then a final one at the end of this kind of planning phase. Now another thing, timeline is critical, right? Every merchant wants to move fast. They want to launch their site, tomorrow, yesterday, whatever it is. Now I have had so many hurry up and wait situations with clients that it gets extremely frustrating after a while. Someone tells you, well, we have to launch this by December 1st. It's like, all right, dude, well, it's going to be kind of aggressive. How are you going to do that? It's like, well, I don't know. You just tell me how we have to get it done. That's really frustrating. Now, what you can do to actually help not only deal with management of timeline expectations, but also to help kind of create a sense of urgency during the sales process is to create what I call kind of a backward sales schedule. So you ask them, when do you want to launch your website? Oh, well, January 1st. Okay, great. On average, it takes us about 2 months to do the delivery phase of a project, usually about a month for us to do the planning phase of the project. It might change a little bit for you, but let's assume the average is the case, in which case we're looking at 3 months out. So that means we're going to have to make sure we start this project October 1st or September 1st. You guys do the math. But either way, doing that, pegging that start date at the beginning of your sales conversations now gives you a very clear timeline as to everything you need to do between that first conversation with the client and that close and kickoff. So now you might say, hey, listen, it's September 1st, we get to kick off, it's August 15th today. We have 2 weeks to scope this project, agree on time and budget, and commit to moving forward. Otherwise, I need you to agree that it's impossible for us to actually meet your deadline. And doing that, setting that level of expectation up front, is going to create a tremendous difference in conversations around timeline later in the project, and also that sense of urgency, earlier on. Now, another thing that I've really been playing around with this year in particular is actually intentionally forcing multiple touch points during sales. I think there's a desire to really work through the sales process as quickly as possible, get to close. And in some ways, yes, we all want that revenue. We all want to close the deal. But by actually requiring there to be multiple conversations before you're willing to give the client the final price, in a way gives you more instances and more opportunities to continue building deeper rapport. I don't know if it's some BS kind of a thing I've experienced, but as I've said, okay, listen, client, it's actually going to take us 4 conversations before I can give you a final cost time for this. Are you comfortable with that? And then getting them to commit to each one of those meetings has actually helped us increase our close, because now we've had so many interactions with the client that we're starting to lay a foundation of communication. Well, why don't we do this? Next 4 weeks, let's just schedule a call every single Wednesday. Let's jump on the phone at 10 a.m. We'll check in on where things are at with the project. We'll go through your requirements, see if anything's changed. We'll see where we're at with the scope. And then at the end of this time period, we're going to close and we're going to move ahead. And by doing this, it really allows you to deepen the relationship that you have with the client. At least it has for us. The next thing that I also sometimes forget, and I think it's a really valuable thing, is to answer questions with stories. So a client asks you, what's your favorite, app for doing X, Y, Z? It's really easy to say, oh, well, we love this, we love that. And that's good and that's helpful. But when you can actually tell a client, well, actually, someone who's just like you, another apparel brand came to us, had the same exact question. And what we did, this was the problem, and we talked about it with them for a little bit. We looked at the options, and we found for them that this worked super well. When you start to personalize your response to questions that clients have, and you start to frame it in stories that are relevant to them and specific to who they are, all of a sudden now the advice and the response you're giving them isn't some generic, oh, well, I know the best email marketing platform, or I know the best blah, blah, blah. You're actually giving them something that feels extremely personable, which it is, it should be, right? So by using these stories as a means of answering questions, and oftentimes more generic than just what's your favorite app for XYZ, but by using stories, it allows you to build a deeper connection with your customers, demonstrate your expertise by actually using real life proof behind some of this stuff, and really kind of accelerate your conversations. The next thing is every single call or meeting that you have with a client should end with, when are we talking or meeting next? And you should pencil that in right then, right there. We have had just too many stalled deals, failed communication, just people ghosting on us. And a lot of the times it's because we're not continuing to move the ball forward. So by setting clear timelines as to how we expect the sales process to run, by having pre-scheduled meetings at the end of every call so we know exactly what the next step is, by having very clear recap emails for clients that explicitly outline what they need to do before that meeting, what we need to do before that meeting, really ensures that you're moving everything forward as much as possible. Now, the next thing is something that we've experimented with in a lot of different ways, and I think we're starting to see more success with it. When you're selling custom solutions and the price point is a higher barrier to entry, or 30 grand, whatever it is, that's not always going to be a good fit for every client with where they might be with their business at that particular time. We've had a lot of people that a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, after our first conversation, have come back to us and said, you know what, actually, now's an awesome time to work together. Things have grown, we're ready to pull the trigger, let's do it. Now, part of that is because we're just very persistent in nurturing those relationships and continuing to stay in touch with people. But another way to do that is to actually have what we call kind of an anchor product. This could be a pay for a day of my time, and I will give you absolutely as much information I can about e-commerce, about your business, and help you just create a roadmap for success so that you can on your own pursue in the next 12 months, and then we talk again in a year, and if there's an opportunity to work together, great, let's do it. Or, hey, we typically only do custom work, but we actually do have a pre-built theme implementation offering, so why don't we do that at a low price point, just get you launched, see what happens after a couple months of running that, then we can talk about a larger engagement. Or, hey, you know what, we got this great premium ebook that we wrote specifically for startups in the e-commerce space. I'll give it to you for $50. Why don't you do that? Find some way to get some sort of a commitment from a potential client so that you start building that customer relationship with them as early as possible. That might lead to further upsells down the line. The next thing is something that's kind of hard to really deal with, but I think it's important. You know, as agency owners and managers, I also believe, I think Natasha said, it's like, you know, we are the ones who are responsible for closing deals, right? We are the ones that, as owners and managers, we know our product best, we know our processes best, we know our client stories best. We should be the ones who are closing these opportunities. But we're not the only one who can. This is especially true when it comes to upselling existing clients. Something that I think I'm very victim to fall to is, once we close a deal, I'm on to the next one. I'm excited for the next project. I get the next one. I'm hunting out the next whale. Where you just built a relationship, you just got a financial commitment from someone who, if you continue to provide good services to, could lead to a whole lot more follow-up money. And building a sense of, or a culture of sales in a very kind of honest and helpful way within the rest of your community, or sorry, the rest of your team, so your designers, your developers, getting all of them excited and ideally incentivized to upsell your services to your clients is key to growing the kind of lifetime value that you have as an agency. So just as merchants think about lifetime value all the time for their customers, repeat sales, referrals, et cetera, we need to do the same thing for our own practices. Now, one way that we actually address this is that we bake support into every single project scope that we write. So we actually require that all of our clients buy a prepaid block of 30 hours. We call it a flex fund. We require every one of our clients to buy a flex fund with any engagement that they have with us. And the idea is, if during the project something comes up that's out of scope, out of process, whatever it might be, we already have 30 hours set aside to address that particular issue, which works really, really well. Now, if they don't use that time, then they have, it doesn't expire. They have unlimited time. They have 30 hours now for however long they need it to then come up with phase 2 items, change requests, future support, whatever. Now, all of a sudden, when you've launched a site and you're a couple weeks out and you're wondering, oh shit, are they gonna stick around? Are we gonna get more money from them? You already have that set aside. There's already a budget in place. Now it's really easy to just immediately jump on their post-launch requests, immediately start talking about conversion rate optimization, immediately start looking at analytics reporting, and starting to get them excited about continuing to work with you. Because I think for a lot of us, we have this very focused mentality when it comes to closing, and then a very focused mentality when it comes to launching a project. And then we just kind of ghost, as much as people ghost on us during the sales process. And I like to see us change that, and I like to see all of us change that, where we focus on the account management aspect as much as possible. And by setting some terms aside, like having a flex fund in place, allows that account management experience to just work far more smoothly. Now, part of this is sort of a phrase that I like, is sell phase 2, day 1. So the day we start scoping a project for a client, we're immediately talking about what we want to do after we launch, right? What are we going to do, a month after we launch, a year after we launch? Where do you want to grow? How are we going to take what you kind of want to do for launch and bump that out? For a couple of reasons. One, the simpler you can make that initial engagement with a client, the more likely it's going to be a success, right? Less headaches, you could probably take less time, maybe it's cheaper for the client as an initial investment. These are all good, positive things, right? We want to demonstrate success as quickly as we possibly can for these clients. And then once we do launch, now we've got our flex fund set aside, we've had a great experience with them so far, and we're on to that upsell, to that next phase, and next phase. So we're very big in kind of anchoring the idea of a follow-up phase, or what we call a future roadmap, in our scoping documents, day one. And the last thing, and I said this at Unite, if any of you guys heard me speak then, I don't think there's a single phrase that sums up our responsibility as partners and agency owners than set expectations, meet expectations. The only two reasons there is ever failure is because you failed to set expectations with a client, or because you failed to meet expectations with a client. If you do those two things, I guarantee you guys will be successful. Thank you all very much.